not used to the wireless mic. I was reading an interesting article recently about preaching, and it made me very sad. The article was about how over the last couple 20, 30 years, sermons have been using less and less scripture. That there have been many more sermons based on one verse or two verses, where it's like, here we're going to use the Bible for just a little bit, and now I'm going to tell you what I want to say about it, rather than really getting in and letting the scripture move you and change you and touch you. So after reading that, I decided this sermon definitely needed a lot more scripture, which is good for me because God speaks a lot better than I can. Let's start with John chapter 4, verse 45. When he arrived in Galilee, he being Jesus, the Galileans welcomed him. They had seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, for they also had been there. Once more he visited Cana in Galilee, where he had turned water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. Unless you people see signs and wonders, Jesus told him, you will never believe. The royal official said, Sir, please come down before my child dies. Go, replied Jesus. Your son will live. The man took Jesus at his word and departed. While he was still on his way, his servants met him with news that the boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son had gotten better, they said to him, Yesterday, at 1 p.m, the fever left him. Then the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, Your son will live. So he and his whole household believed. Matthew chapter 8. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, See that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Mark chapter 2. A few days later, when Jesus entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it and lowered the mat the man was laying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, Son, your sins are forgiven. Now some teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, Why does this fellow talk like that? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this is what they were thinking in their hearts. He said to them, Why are you thinking these things? Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, Your sins are forgiven, or to say, Get up, take your mat, and walk? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So he said to the man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. He got up, took his mat, and walked out. full view of all of them. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." Mark chapter 5. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her, so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. While Jesus was still speaking, the people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid. Just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, with the people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "What is all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and told them to give her something to eat. Luke chapter 17. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." As they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise up and go. Your faith has made you well." Matthew chapter 20. As Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. 2 blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet, but they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." Jesus stopped and called to them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately they received their sight and followed him. Mark chapter 11. The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And the disciples heard him say it. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Peter remembered and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered." "Have faith in God," Jesus answered. "Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Go, throw yourself into the sea,' and does not doubt in their heart, but believes what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. I've been thinking about what is the difference, the true difference between Christianity and other religions, social clubs, groups, self-help books. What's truly the difference? Because in some ways they can have some very close similarities. They both can have a series of beliefs. Here's what we believe, even if they're slightly different. Both of them often tell us to be better people, to be nicer, kinder, more loving. They can both provide a community where we can belong. So what is the huge deal about being a Christian? How is it different? And the difference is very simple. We serve a living God. Our God has worked in the creation of the world. And God continues to work in us and for us and through us today. God affects our lives on a daily basis. We serve a powerful God. We serve a God who can perform miracles. Our God enriches and improves our lives on a daily basis. In the New Testament, there are 37 different examples of Jesus performing miracles. And that doesn't even count all the miracles that are performed by God in the Old Testament, such as the creation of the world, and also many miracles that were performed by the apostles. If you have your sermon paper, you can see the list of all of the miracles that Jesus performed in the New Testament. If you do not have a copy of the sermon, you'll either have to imagine them in your head, or you'll have to have really, really good eyesight. Can you read? Kidding. But the purpose is not to go over every single miracle and why it's in the Bible and why it's written in. But I just found this list fascinating. Is because Jesus performed miracles for all sorts of different people. He healed and saved the rich. Think Jairus' daughter, the centurion's servant, the official son. He helped the sick people, the outcasts, lepers, demon-possessed people, dead people. And he helped the swelling masses, the people who were just a huge group of people of every level of money, wealth, social acceptance. Jesus performed miracles to help us. I worry that sometimes we forget that we serve a God who can heal us when we are sick. A God who can comfort us when we're scared and alone. That we serve a God who can do things that we cannot even imagine. I am so tired of hearing Christians talk about their God, about our God, like he doesn't do anything, like he's weak, like he just sits on a throne up high and gives us rules of things to do. I don't know about you, but I serve an amazing God who does amazing things. Reminds me of a story I read a while ago. There was a non-believing lecturer lecturer in a mining town north of England. And he gave an address in which he demolished and argued against everything in the Bible, everything about Christ, everything about Christianity. And when he finished, he said, "Now, I hope I have succeeded in explaining to you that the existence of Jesus Christ is nothing but a myth." As he was finished speaking, a miner who had entered wearing his grimy clothes, obviously he had just come from work, he stood up and said, "Sir, I'm only a working man, and I don't even really know what you mean by the word myth. But can you explain something to me? 3 years ago, I had a miserable home. I neglected my wife and children. I cursed and I swore, and I spent all of my money on alcohol. Then someone came along and showed me the love of God and his son Jesus Christ. And now everything is different. We have a happy home. I love my wife and children. I feel better in every way, and I have given up drinking. A new power has taken over possession of me since Christ came into my life. Sir, can you explain this to me?" The lecturer had no explanation to give. And the people that day left knowing that the gospel is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. This whole miracle thing is very hard for me. Very hard for me personally. Because I don't like things I cannot understand. I'm a very logical person. And I like to be able to figure out how things work. So when I hear about like the radio, how do these sound waves come out of the radio? I can hear them. I don't understand. And so then I, read a bunch of books and I figure it out and I understand it. And then I forget about it and now I don't remember how it works anymore. But it's like that with everything, right? I have to be able to figure out how it works. Logically, how does it fit together? There are a lot of things I don't understand in this world. There are people who have been riddled with cancer. The doctor said there's nothing more we can do, who are miraculously healed. There are people who are on the verge of bankruptcy, about to lose their home, who get mysterious money in the mail, and there's no explaining who sent it or how it arrived or why it arrived. There are some of the worst people in this world. Drugs, abusers, murderers, who connect with God. Their lives are forever changed. Miracles happen. They happen in biblical times. I see them happening today. I see them in this world. And it's easy to become cynical and to say, "Oh, that just happened," or "I'm sure there's a logical explanation, we just don't know it." I'd rather know that my God perform miracles. My God can heal. That doesn't mean that I always always expected. That whenever things are bad, God's going to perform a miracle and change everything. But I have the hope, knowing that my God loves me. My God can do miraculous things. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Lord, help us to be open to the wonders that are going around us every day. The people whose lives are being changed. People who are being healed. Help us to not become cynical. Help us to not downplay Christianity. Help us to always know that we are serving you, God, a great